Good morning, this is Rhonda. Today I want to talk about seeing the unseen. I've been hearing a lot in the news about this unseen enemy that we're fighting. This COVID virus is being called the unseen enemy. Earlier in the week, as I was doing my devotions, I was reading through 2 Kings chapter 6, and I came across a story that really kind of connected with this whole idea of the unseen enemy. It's a story of Elisha, and it's found in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 8 through 23, if you want to take a look at it. Just let me summarize the story for you real quickly. First of all, Elisha helps the king. The king of Israel is worried about another king attacking him, and so Elisha keeps warning him so that he can go and get out of the way of an ambush or whatever. Well, the other king gets angry, and now the bad guys are after Elisha. They actually bring an entire army to look for Elisha because they're tired of this guy ratting them out every time they get ready to attack. Well, they surround the city where Elisha is, and the servant of Elisha is in a panic. He looks out and he sees all these soldiers. He's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We're going to die. Elisha prays, and he prays for the servant's eyes to be opened. The servant looks around, and now, lo and behold, he sees angel armies all around, chariots of fire and soldiers of the Lord surrounding them, and he realizes that those that are with them are more than those that are against them. And so he is encouraged and no longer afraid or terrified. They end up taking those soldiers captive, and we'll mention that a little bit later. But as I'm reading this story, there were 4 ideas that came out of the story connected with this seeing the unseen. So the first idea was there's more to it than meets the eye. Everything that we face in life, we have to remember that there's a spiritual warfare going on in the background. There's always this eternal battle between good and evil that God is fighting for us, and we need to remember that there's always more to whatever the situation is that we see. In Ephesians 6:12, it says, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the world powers of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavens. So regardless of the struggle, there's more to it than what we can see. Secondly, God can open or close eyes. And it's interesting in this story that Elisha prays for his servant's eyes to be open, but he also prays for his enemies to be blinded, which I thought was a little bit ironic in this story. It's interesting also, though, that even though he prays for his enemies to be blinded, ultimately he leads them away to Samaria, where he turns them over to his king, and then he tells the king, no, just feed them and turn them loose. So ultimately they're shown mercy and grace, and their eyesight is restored, and they're set free instead of being killed or taken as slaves. Jesus said in Matthew, but your eyes are blessed or blessed because they do see. Understanding spiritual things really is a gift of God. And sometimes we might look at other people and say, why don't you get it? I don't understand. But we have to realize that spiritual wisdom and the ability to perceive spiritual things is definitely a gift of God. And we want to be thankful for that and submit to that. So the next thing is there's a reason to have hope. Elisha didn't just tell his servant, hey, have faith, it's going to be okay. He showed him a reason. He said, hey, Lord, open his eyes so he can see. And he saw a reason to be hopeful and not afraid. And I think he does the same thing for us. I like this quote from a gentleman named Morgan. It says, faith is never the imagining of unreal things. It is the grip of things which cannot be demonstrated to the senses, but which are real. And the scripture says it this way. Faith is the reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen. Hebrews 11:1. And so it's not just blind faith. It's just not just hope that everything's going to turn out great, but it's knowing who God is and being able to learn more about him from the scripture that gives us hope. The more knowledge we have about God and the character of God, the more we can have the hope. And then the last thing, God is reliable, but not predictable. And this was an interesting thought as I was researching and studying this passage. God does provide us certain things that he promises in the scripture. He provides his presence. Jesus said, I am with you always in Matthew 28. He also provides us protection. In Psalm 34:7, it tells us the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. Now, it doesn't mean we're always rescued necessarily from the actions, anything bad that might happen, or the negative thing that we're fearing, but it does mean that he will deliver us in some way. He may deliver us by giving us strength and hope to go through a difficult time, by giving us grace to be able to deal with something hard that happens, but his protection is there as a promise. And then his providence. I like it in James 4 where it says, whatever the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. So God is reliable. We know that we can count on his presence, we can count on his protection, we can count on his providence, but he's not always predictable. He's not always going to answer in the way that we think he will. He's not always going to do what we might think is the right answer or the best answer, but we know that he will do something that is consistent with his character, is consistent with his love for us, and that he is the King of the universe and he will do right. So finally, I want you to use the lens of faith to see the unseen. As we're thinking about this unseen enemy, the virus that we're fighting, and we're thinking about all the other things going on around us, let's go back to the Lord. Let's go back to this verse in 2 Corinthians. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. God bless.